Our political opponents, though, are not our enemies. The press is not the enemy of the people. Before we're Democrats or Republicans or Independents, sounds corny, but before that, we're Americans. And here's what I hope. I hope that this craziness that's going on about these pipe bombs, I hope and pray that our leaders are going to work to lower the temperature in our public dialogue. And I have faith the vast majority will do that. Because, folks, we're a lot better than this. We just have to remember who we are, what we stand for as a nation.
2 of the 13 suspicious packages found in recent days were addressed to that man, former Vice President Joe Biden, and that was his unifying message this afternoon, hours after federal authorities first identified a suspect. It was a call for unity and a cooling of tensions, a stark contrast to what's appeared on Donald Trump's Twitter feed in the last few days. In fact, Trump's social media conduct is a far cry from the strategies past presidents have used in times like these, where Trump attacked the media for negative stories and attacked Twitter for his follower count today. Listen to how his predecessors handled moments of crisis.
When our citizens are abused or attacked anywhere in the world on the direct orders of a hostile regime, we will respond so long as I'm in this Oval Office.
It was an act of cowardice, and it was evil. The United States will not tolerate it, and I will not allow the people of this country to be intimidated by evil cowards.
The object of terrorism is to try to force us to change our way of life, is to force us to retreat, is to force us to be what we're not, and they're going to fail. They're simply going to fail.
But as Americans and as a nation, we will not be terrorized. We will not cower in fear. We will not be intimidated. We will be vigilant, and we will work together.
I've updated leaders of Congress in both parties, and we reaffirmed that on days like this, there are no Republicans or Democrats. We are Americans, united in concern for our fellow citizens.
Joining us now is A.B. Stoddard, associate editor and columnist for RealClearPolitics, Jason Johnson, politics editor for The Root, and the Rev. Al Sharpton, president of the National Action Network and host of Politics Nation here on MSNBC. Jason, let me start with you, because you and I were together Wednesday when the suspect hadn't been identified, when the FBI hadn't moved so quickly on the fingerprint. 3 more persons targeted, 3 more devices uncovered this morning. FBI making clear they don't know how many more could be out there. But your thoughts on both the day's developments and the president's conduct?
Well, one, it's good to see that the FBI and national security agencies continue to do their job with vigilance, despite the fact that they've been bludgeoned by this president for the last year for supposed incompetence and corruption. Our lives, as much as I may have criticisms of how law enforcement operates in this country, they are still our line of defense against maniacs and terrorists out there. But I have to say, Nicolle, and this has always been a problem with this president, he has always shown a sympathy or a dismissiveness towards terrorism. He is a terrorist sympathizer. I mean, given the way that he responded to what happened in Charlottesville, given how he responded to Khashoggi, given the fact that he puts what's happened today and through this week in the context of how it affects the midterm elections, we don't have leadership in this country when it comes to domestic terrorism. This president foments it as much as he is occasionally forced to speak against it. And unfortunately, it's going to take men and women like ourselves and people in the media and day-to-day Americans to fight against this, because we will not get the kind of verbal or moral leadership we get from anybody in this administration.
Frank Figliuzzi, I want you to jump in on that point and talk about whether or not it impedes the efforts of law enforcement. I know domestic terrorism doesn't get the kind of attention and fanfare that terrorist attacks hatched and plots from overseas do, but talk about how law enforcement fights that threat, and if they see the president as somewhat indifferent or not as agitated by domestic terror as he is by potential actions from a caravan of what appear to be asylum seekers to me coming toward this country from Central America.
Yeah, so first, look, there's 2 aspects to this. Whether or not the president is impeding the work of law enforcement and intelligence, and then even more important question, is he actually contributing to the problem by generating the problem itself? If you're a Secret Service agent tonight, an FBI agent tonight, I think you're probably thinking this was waiting to happen. This was a crisis waiting to happen, and that our nation experienced a near miss this week. but it could have been so much worse. And the issue of leadership during a time like this cannot be overstated. The leadership is either going to come from the White House, as in examples you just played in video clips, or it's going to come from Congress refusing to weigh in with this and stepping up and calling the president out, saying, that's not right, we're going to do this differently. Neither one of those is happening right now. So if you're among the men and women of law enforcement, you're knowing that the next one is coming. We may have escaped this one, but the next one is coming. Nicolle, we had a man driving around in a van in the greater Miami area with politicians in the crosshairs plastered all over his van, and no one called and said, I'm worried about this guy. This guy scares me. Has this become our new normal, where we're accepting of people with crosshairs of politicians on their cars?
It's a terrifying thought, but you want to take a stab at answering the question?
I think that he's right. I think that, yes, we need to be glad tonight that law enforcement has done what they did. And I think that when you look at the fact that, yes, there's no moral leadership shown by this president, but he doesn't even have political instincts. If a man is running around the van with Make America Great, all of this Trump stuff, and then those that are opposed to Trump, he's got their photos all over the van, including some of us, me and two other colleagues here. You would think the president, 11 days before midterms, would say, and I don't want anyone supporting me to identify with any violence, and make it personal. It would be the political thing to do. If I was a Republican candidate, I would want him to denounce it personally, just like on the other side he says a vote for a Republican is a vote for me. He should reprimand him. When we've had situations in civil rights and people will become unhinged, we'd say, wait a minute, we denounce that. That doesn't represent us. When the congressman was shot, when they were doing the congressional baseball game, all of us came out and said, this is wrong, we denounce it. He has not even denounced someone who identified with his politics, less known, given law enforcement the credit that they should have, or even picked up the phone and called any of those that were targeted with these pipe bombs, which would have been the presidential thing to do.
You're absolutely right. We've just reported that President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump, as of the time we came on the air, have not reached out to their predecessors concerning the pipe bomb addressed to them this week. That's based on multiple sources familiar with the situation. A.B. Stoddard, I want to ask you something. The president this week announced that the Pentagon would send, I believe, 800 troops to the border, ostensibly to protect this country from a slow-moving group of families, children, women who are under the camera coverage of another network 24/7, moving very slowly. I think they're about 1,200 miles away from the southern border. That decision was made to send those resources to the southern border, which already has a wall and drones and several law enforcement agencies protecting it. And I'm not aware of any actions he took personally to help catch a serial mail bomber targeting his political rivals. Are you?
Oh. I mean, Nicolle, the tweet this morning said it all. I know that he has really been outrageous on his Twitter feed for 3 years running, or even before he was a candidate. But I do think this morning's one that you've had up on screen is really one of the lowest of his entire candidacy and presidency. He was basically saying, boo-hoo, the focus is off of the scary caravan that I keep trying to spotlight and highlight, and is all I want to talk about. And I can't believe we have to deal with this bomb stuff, in quotes, when the lives of former presidents, not to mention people in mailrooms and security details across the country's lives, were at risk these last few days. They probably couldn't sleep. God forbid something happened to them. And He's never going to take this with the seriousness with which his job requires. He's held to a higher threshold. The burden on him is bigger. He refuses to accept it. We've seen that again and again. I think the problem for me this week is really watching Republicans who continue to abdicate their own responsibility at these moments, and people in your party, Nicolle, who could have stood up and said, you know what, actually, I mean, they tweeted about we don't want violence, this and that, but what about something today after that tweet? Why is Lindsey Graham, always trying to calm the president down and then pleading with him in his Twitter feed for moral leadership to stand up to the Saudi government, but he couldn't say today that's not what we're talking about. We're not trying to use this for political gain and scare people about the caravan just to juice the early voting totals for Republicans. I'm just stunned that they would read that and watch the way he's comported himself the last 72 hours and continue to be quiet.
It's galling. It's galling. It's nothing short of galling. Do you have an answer to why they sent 800 troops to the southern border to ostensibly protect this country from a slow-moving human tragedy? And they didn't do anything that we know. Jonathan, do you have any reporting on why the priority was on what is obviously to the president a fake news media event? He wants us to go back to covering. We shouldn't call it a caravan. It's a slow-moving human tragedy.
That's right. And I think there are two things at once here. I mean, there's certainly, look, you'd like to think that General Mattis and the Pentagon would not be involved in something that's simply political purposes. There is some element
but they are.
Border security. But this is clearly, the timing of this is such, just less than 2 weeks from the midterms, where it's hard to read anything other than politics.
Let me stop you, though. They were involved in putting babies in cages. That happened on military bases, and now they're involved in sending 800 troops to the border to protect us from a slow-moving human tragedy full of families and children.
They're taking their orders from the commander-in-chief. The commander-in-chief who wants certain issues to be at the forefront in the final stretch here. The Republicans, people in the White House, people close to Trump, have been feeling really good the last couple of weeks about where things were. They do feel like they got a burst of energy after the Kavanaugh hearings. They do think, as cynical as it may be, I talked to someone close to the White House in the last couple of days who said the caravan is the best thing for us. That the more Fox News shows that the overhead view of those people walking up 1,000 miles from the border, but it looks menacing, it looks scary. That's good for us.
Fox
we want
News
to be
cameras are on it 24/7.
Right. We want to be strong on immigration.
Middle Easterners hiding.
And you're seeing that today. I mean, you're seeing, that frustration from the president in the tweet today. That's what he wants to be talking about, not this mail bomber.
Frank Figliuzzi, thank you for spending some time with us. When we come back, even as Donald Trump condemned the, quote, terrorizing acts of the suspected mail bomber, his effect on the political discourse was on full display from the crowd. We'll show you what we're talking about.